Okay, deconstruction. Now, what is deconstruction? Deconstruction is a word that Derrida put forth, and basically, what he was doing by deconstruction is he was taking the reasonability of our language, the truth falsity of it, the here and not there, or there and not here, meaning he was taking the logical consequent of our language, looking at it prepositionally, syntactically, and what he was doing is he was finding binaries, binary systems, essentially, within the language. And then what he was doing is he was taking the binary system and he was monizing it. He was collapsing one end of the binary system into the other end and calling the first one primary. So, and how this is done is he would say up and down. Now, did people first point up and note up and name up and then say, well, its opposite is something like up, but it's this way, so we're going to call it down. So is falsity, did first we live in a world with falsity and somehow the not making sense of things, we found a type of falsity over here that consistently started to make sense, so we called it truth? Or was it that there were certain truths, certain things that made sense, and then we said, well, what about all the things that don't make sense over here? So is truth a type of falsity, or is falsity a type of truth? And I would argue that it's falsity, or something to the effect is life and death, up and down, in and out. And so life and death. Well, let's see. We have all this material in front of us. Everyone's seeing moving material or static material or wind blowing or trees blowing. It's all moving. And then we say, well, this conglomeration of material over here is pulsing, where this type over here is not pulsing. So we might say that life is that there's more non-pulsing. So we might have looked at non-pulsing first and said, well, life is a particular type of death. And so we would then make death primary. We would make falsity primary. We would make down primary or up primary. It doesn't have to be counterintuitive. It might seem intuitive, but his whole point was to collapse all binary systems, suggesting that the formation of this system, of its opposite, first was a positing of one thing and then looking at its exceptions and stating that its exceptions as its opposite in binary form. And so to deconstruct a binary is to collapse all binaries. Now, there's multiple systems, or there's good and bad and good and wicked, or good and evil, or right and wrong, or right and left. And then we're talking about two different senses of these different words, but they're still the same word. So, and then Nietzsche will pull apart the difference between good and bad as opposed to good and evil, and he'll make a huge drastic difference between what it is to be good. And so he's deconstructing all of the opposites around what it is to be good or full for or living or impulsive or to have viva and strength within the viva. And so the idea of what it means to collapse the language into a primary system, and then what Derrida likes to do is order this. So he speaks about the dissemination as opposed to the insemination. So the primaries between the in and out. This is where sexualism within the language can come in, because the collapse of saying the in, well, the speaker that's a female might say that in is primary, where the speaker that's male might say that the out is primary. Because this woman is a form of man, or this man is just a form of this woman, or that the intercourse itself might have been the first, to speculate, might have been the first processes in which there could be a conflict due to sexualism, due to the morphism within the language. Of course, his dissemination and what he's referring to is phallocentric and hymenal-centric. These arguments are specific to his texts, and so I'm not going to slaughter them with some notion of what they are. But I did want to throw this out because deconstruction allows us to reinvigorate or add something new. So, like acceleration, we added deceleration when at one point acceleration meant to decelerate or accelerate, and it still does in engineering. Or in Azrionok's case, instead of dynamic, dynamic or static was the case. Well, he's adding monamic as the ulterior word for a certain lack of inner exchange. And so there's a placement of reconstruction or reconfiguration of language where we can throw in new words and new concepts and new ideas. And as the internet grows and information shared more and more and more, we should be infiltrated by multitudes of different types of characters and imagination and data and the things that will make our lives incredibly rich. But as far as reducing it and taking a reductionary process, this is strictly to get down to what it is we call core or common or oriented in what it is humanity has inherited throughout all of its trees of language breaks, all of its common languages, all of its separations of tribes and groups, and the history of that, and then the trees that sprout from it, and then the reconfiguration of the language as the world's getting smaller once again, the tree is growing into itself. So deconstruction functions as the process of recognizing that this occurrence has happened and that it has happened from a singular point. It's the belief that there was a individual birth of language, and that we call that the man and the living, or Adam and Eve, and that we have our biblical texts that point to this. Not that I'd say that Derrida was enforcing religious texts as much as he was describing human orientation to it, or the modern human condition, at least when he wrote it, and how he perceived the world as coming down to a primary series of primaries that functioned as an axis in which everything else rotates from, and that orientation is an orientation that we, within our chakra system, our standing up straight, our extenuation of ideas, and our belief system is aligned to an orientation. It's where one feels like they are fastidious through their all the inherited structures, the large inherited structures that come through like class systems, social systems, other I'll call them pyramidical systems that are enforced or brought into and that are inherent within the language. These things he's trying to show us are on an orientation themselves, and that we can war with that, and that a lot of neuroses, like this is my going-ons now, is that a lot of neuroses is simply a disorientation with the grander inheritance of the language that you have, and maybe people are conflicted because of different languages that they've inherited and the sort. Anyway, I think I'll go ahead and stop the series now and publish it and see what kind of feedback I get. Should be kind of interesting, I hope. And I hope you enjoyed my rambling, and hopefully you understand a little bit more about what it is I do, or what it is I'm trying to do, and what it is I am trying to convey about my understanding of language. Anyway, cheerio guys, I'm off to paint a painting.